ranking member of the committee, the full committee, Darrell Issa of California, and the ranking member of the Federal Workforce Subcommittee and a member of the Census Subcommittee, Jason Chaffetz from Utah. Today we are here to draw attention to we're 1 year out from the census. Census Day 2010 is 1 year away. It will be April 1st as mandated by federal law, and the culmination of the last 10 years of work by the Census Bureau will take place on that day. And on that day, we'll be asking Americans to respond to the mail that we've sent them, to follow up on the advertising that is preceded for months ahead. And if those that do not respond on Census Day, for those that do not respond on Census Day, we will then follow up with a visit and knock on their door. The Obama administration in the last few weeks has backtracked on moving control of the Census Bureau from the White House, from the Census Bureau to the White House. But the question is, does the White House still intend to exert political influence over the 2010 census? And that question will be answered by the President's nomination of a Census Bureau director. If the President's nominee supports a political manipulation of census data, then we have our answer, that they do intend to manipulate the census for political gain. If that's the case, then the fight to protect the integrity of the 2010 census has just begun. The political manipulation of the census is about one thing: political power. It's about seats in the United States House of Representatives and the seats in both state houses and state senates of all the 50 states. And the partisan adjustment of the census does not resolve the issue of an undercount of individuals in this country. The Census Bureau is taking unprecedented steps and spending unprecedented amounts of money to advertise to these undercounted groups and communities. The partisan adjustment of the census does, however, violate federal law and permanently destroy the credibility of our country's statistical system. The Constitution is clear. It's a count, not an a count. To manipulate the census data, the White House will have to force its own Commerce Secretary to contradict his sworn testimony from confirmation hearings. Locke ruled out the statistical sampling used to manipulate the census and said no statistical modeling would be used, end quote. It would also force civil servants to act against their wishes and their own sworn testimony before our subcommittee. This leaves one thing. It leaves the politics of redistricting and the consequences of destroying the credibility of the census data. My point there is that if the White House manipulates the census, it will destroy the essence of the census. But if they truly allow for a nonpartisan, apolitical census to occur, as has been the sworn testimony by the acting census director and others within the Census Bureau, then the country's statistical system can be safe and we can truly rely on the data presented. And with that, I turn it over to Congressman Issa, the ranking member on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee.
Thank you. As you can see, the three of us are here because we consider it extremely important that we continue to be trusting in our census personnel to do the right thing if political influence is not asserted from the left or the right. Our challenge for Jason and for Patrick and myself is not to weigh in on our side to affect the outcome. It's simply to recognize that the Constitution is clear, that the new nominee for Secretary of Commerce has said he understands that. We expect this administration to back off from operating it literally within the White House, and if they do so, we want to be supportive of a full count, the finest count ever done, the most expensive count ever done, but this mobilization can be better than any other census done before. We want to be supportive of that. At the same time, I think all of you are acutely aware that the idea that Rahm Emanuel would take personal charge of the census is something that we rejected, and fortunately the administration has backed off.
thank you. I appreciate it. A year from now, more than 1 million Americans will fan out across America to make sure that we have an accurate census. We all want that census to be accurate. We want to make sure everyone is counted, not overcounted, not undercounted, and not estimated. I am deeply concerned about the lack of clear standards regarding the partnership provided by the census. The census offers a partnership program that you can see on their website. I think we have some handouts here. I think there is reason to be concerned that the Census Department does not have clear guidelines regarding who can and cannot participate as a partner with the United States Census. We have certainly heard about ACORN and the unethical and unacceptable behavior that they as an organization have been involved with in the past. ACORN has a history of embarrassing and unethical behavior. Based on the testimony of the acting director, I think that it certainly bears consideration regarding the standard by which the census will or will not accept somebody as a partner. Integrity in this process is paramount. If the American people have a lack of trust about the very people that are coming to their door to gather personal information, then we will have failed. And so I would hope that the Census Bureau looked much deeper at this. The GAO asked after the 2000 census that there be clear guidelines. There are not. And again, this is why I have deep concern and want to make sure that we rectify this position and this issue as we move forward, because unethical and unreliable information is simply not acceptable. With that, I'll turn it back to Patrick.
Thank you. Questions? Comments? Concerns? Yes.
Yes, hi. Regarding the hard-to-count population, which traditionally been disproportionately minority and immigrant populations, in 2000, the Bureau asked the government to suspend immigration raids for a while during the count to kind of ensure a fuller count. That's something that apparently Congressman Clay would like to see again in 2010. What is the view, and some Hispanic groups are actually saying they want to see immigration reform taken up now to kind of address some of these ongoing issues.
The census is free from their information being used in any way, shape, or form by any other agency, including the IRS, including the INS. So we expect that the collection process is to be private and, in fact, not for that information to be shared. And I think that's the standard on which we would tend to stand.
Okay, but I guess I'm
Well,
wondering...
to answer your question, to state it another way, the President has a bully pulpit and has the ability to communicate with the American people that the census data will not be used by any other division or bureau within the government, and make that clear. But as a policymaker, I do not think it's appropriate for us to suspend the enforcement of laws for any reason.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm wondering, because, for example, in 2000 they did do it, and there was still a substantial undercount of minorities and Hispanics.
First of all, I apologize. What paper are you from?
Oh, this is Hopian with the Associated Press.
Okay. The claims of an undercount are always just that, they're claims. And we want to make sure that we do a better and better job of there not being an undercount or, in fact, false counts. As you know, there's also been claims, sometimes verified, where you end up with a house that isn't occupied or no one's in, that turned out to have lots of people on the census. So some of this inaccuracy goes both ways. But back to the answer you deserve for your question, the answer is we do not believe you should suspend normal law enforcement, including the INS, during this period. On the other hand, this million people that are being mobilized, they're sworn to privacy. There is no link between their collection. So there's nothing coming from the census that would trigger somebody being deported or in any way, shape, or form being injured. But the idea, as in during the Clinton administration, the idea that you're going to have a suspension of normal behavior, have our Border Patrol, our INS, ICE agents all just sit on the sidelines for so many days simply is not reasonable. Those people are looking for terrorists more than they're looking for illegal immigrants, but the fact is they do their job every day.
One more quick question. So is there full confidence that Hispanic communities will be counted this time around?
Well, actually, I'd refer you to a GAO report that was released last week with our hearing, and it actually details the undercount and overcount. And what you would see is we're talking about 2% to 3% on an undercount among different communities. And so the magnitude of which you're talking, as Congressman Isis said, is just not as large as you're stating. And so what I would point you to is the fact that the President has the ability to communicate. We're spending tens of millions of dollars to communicate in targeted media. This is what our hearing was about last week, and I think it's appropriate. We have targeted media. We have partnerships in the community. There are trusted voices in the community. It could be a chamber of commerce. Could be a community group. It could be any number of groups within a particular community that will tell local populations that it's okay to answer the door. It's okay to respond to the Census Bureau because it's safe from, political manipulation, safe from use by any other division of government.
Other questions?
Yes.
I have a question about the concern about the partnership program. Census workers who are actually hired by the Census Bureau are undergoing fingerprinting and background checks. Is your concern about the partnership program based on the idea that maybe that system is not airtight and partners?
It's not airtight. Based on the testimony that we heard from the acting director, there are no clear guidelines. There is no written guideline as to who is an acceptable and non-acceptable partner. My concern is if you look at that seal, it says the United States Census 2010. We need to have that seal represent integrity. And so by the acting director's own testimony, if that organization has a history of being, in his words, an embarrassment, then that should probably exclude them from participating in the census. This is basically helping to give license, if you will, for somebody to go to the door and extract very personal information. So the integrity is of utmost concern. And there are no written guidelines by which we exclude organizations from being a partner with the United States Census.
The entire process is one that we're trying to improve. We're trying to stop felons who may just be casing homes, pedophiles who may be looking for children. The fact is that when you mobilize 1 million people, screening through all the people who are doing it either really just for the right reasons and the few who would be doing it for the wrong reason is essential, and it's very difficult to do on a large scale. Obviously, there's a special concern by organizations who might mobilize people to get an inaccurate count in favor of some agenda, but we want the system to be as airtight as it can be for all kinds of reasons, including protecting the public from somebody bearing the badge of the United States and perhaps not being fit to do it or having another agenda, even if it's not a political one.
Let me just add to that when you have an organization such as ACORN that is proven to be unreliable and unethical in their behavior, then you diminish the credibility that the census will have if they continue to be a partner. These enumerators that will go out and fan across the country, I'm convinced that the census is doing everything they can to know who those enumerators are. I was actually pleasantly surprised to learn that the penalty for somebody who knowingly and willfully tries to manipulate the census can spend up to 5 years in jail and be fined up to $250,000. So the penalties are severe. But again, the integrity of the entire operation is reliant upon good, honest Americans stepping forward to participate in extracting that information as an enumerator.
But the people who are actually going to go knock on doors will have undergone a background check and a fingerprinting check and extensive investigation of any criminal record that they may have. Is your concern that that system itself is not airtight and people with criminal motives are going to make it through?
Actually, this is a concern by Congressman Maloney raised this concern about having to go through the process and the time it would take. Well, we passed a federal law, and the Census Bureau obviously wants to comply and be a part of this to make sure that system is airtight, because they're very aware if you have one bad apple, it could have a chilling effect on people answering their door, which could further lead to a larger undercount.
Look at the third bullet point on the thing I handed out to you. It says, right now, ACORN is a partner. Provide space for testing and training of census employees. I think there are masses of Americans who would be scared to death to go into an ACORN office to be trained as a partner under the partnership rules. I think that sends a chilling effect to people.
So do you want them to drop ACORN, or do you have very specific partnership guidelines, not about people's personal backgrounds, but about who politically they're connected to?
I want the Census Department to clearly articulate what is acceptable in terms of being a partner and what is not acceptable.
But
At
what do you
threshold?
perceive to be acceptable?
It's not about picking on ACORN. It's about setting a threshold where there are some organizations that are probably should be excluded from being a partner. And it was something that came out in the GAO report after the 2000 census that there need to be clear guidelines, and there aren't. I think that's unacceptable, and it needs to be changed in the very near future so that we're not randomly picking for political purposes some organization here or there. There should be guidelines. But when you have a history of voter fraud, and you have a history of unethical behavior, when you have the chairman of the Judiciary Committee wanting to call hearings to investigate ACORN and their voter fraud, I think that would give rise, from both sides of the aisle, that this is an organization that has participated in nefarious activities. And it's not just ACORN. There could be others out there that maybe aren't so visible. That's the concern.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Have you heard anything from the White House or from other administration officials that sort of put to rest the concern that the White House would be overly involved, or is there anything that you could say or that would put that concern?
The White House has been very silent on this. However, now Secretary Locke was specific in his confirmation hearings and was questioned before the Senate Commerce Committee, if I'm correct on the committee. He was questioned directly about the political manipulation of the census and statistical adjustment as well. And he gave pretty strong answers in terms of his belief that the census should be free from political manipulation or White House meddling. But
does that satisfy? Does that put the rest of your concern?
there are other individuals who could answer for the White House. The Chief of Staff and the President could allay these fears by stating clearly, to the opposite effect of what they assured some of their Democrat members of Congress. Democrat members, a few Democrat members of Congress had these meetings. You've got better sources than I do, obviously, on these meetings. But what we understand from those meetings is the White House intended to have major involvement and oversee the census directly. It would be good to hear from the Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, and the President himself, stating clearly that they will not manipulate the census.
One more question.
Yes.
With essentially no leadership right now and some questions about, say, technical issues in the field, their handheld devices they're going out to collect information with, do you feel fully confident that the census is going into this year prepared for what's to come?
Well, we've asked in the hearings that we've had before our subcommittee, we've asked directly, are you prepared to go and see through this census, whether or not there's a director appointed or not? And they have stated clearly that yes, they're prepared. They have the funding, they have the policies in place, and they're ready to go. The GAO report has raised some concerns. Congressman Chaffetz has touched on the partnership concerns to make sure that those folks are held to high standards. But otherwise, in terms of the funding, in terms of the ability to communicate with a budget that is commensurate with that, with the ability to have a full staff, they're ready to go. And the acting director, Mr. Metzenberg, is fully competent to carry through this census.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Can I ask a quick question? Tony, I asked, do you see the Washington